All right, are we all set?
Looks like we're all set if you just want to share in slide share mode and introduce yourself.
I'm sharing. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. My name's Sheri Schulte. I'm an associate, just got promoted a few months ago, associate professor of practice in the management department at the University of Akron College of Business. I'm also the assessment officer for the College of Business and course coordinator for one of our core courses, Management Principles, the course that we'll be talking about today. So thank you for joining our session called Transitioning to an Open Educational Resource for a Master Core Course. With the expansion of open resources, I thought it might be helpful to hear about our process of transitioning to an open textbook with the intent on having the course peer-reviewed for the future. So by sharing our work, a couple of objectives for today. One, I'm hoping you'll be able to apply a course design template. I won't go over it in the session because of the limited time, but I have posted an alignment document that is pretty self-explanatory with the PowerPoint. So hopefully you'll be able to use that. Maybe you'll get some ideas about how to evaluate and select an open resource. So I'm going to walk through our process and get a sense of how long it took and who was involved. And then also hoping you can identify some techniques to maybe help you deliver consistent course content across sections of a core course. And I'm also going to describe how our work was part of our university's Affordable Learning Initiative. So let's start with the process or the project plan. It really started back in the spring of 2017, and when our department chair asked me to be course coordinator for this course, the previous person who had that role was no longer with the university. And so I said, okay. And then he said, well, I have a few things I'd like to throw out there. So the challenge he posted was he wanted more consistency across these, 5 or 6 sections sometimes in a semester across this course. And at the same time, we had new Ohio tag requirements. I really didn't even know anything about those, but turns out they had come out the year before and we hadn't really addressed them to make sure we were in alignment. And then the final part of the task was finding a new textbook. I had just started to learn about open resources. I had been at an ACSB assessment conference. And so I wasn't really committed one way or the other, but definitely, was intrigued about the concept. So that spring, I sat down with the tag requirements against our current design. There was some overlap. There was some things we needed to strengthen, some things we could take out because we just didn't have enough time in the semester to do it all. The tag requirement had in fact, the tag course was called Management and Org Behavior. So there was a little bit more OB than we had. So I needed to make sure that was reconciled with our OB course. So we weren't, repeating at the same level all of that content. So we worked through that. And I looked at a number of books. I think I reviewed about eight or nine. Had this beautiful little spreadsheet with all of my content down the left. And then as I added books across the top, I kind of checked off where there was alignment there. And it was interesting because one of the books I came across, actually the small publisher found me. They had created a book for this course specifically for another university that mapped the Ohio tag requirements. So as you can imagine, that was pretty tempting. And it wasn't really all that expensive, but it wasn't free. And so ultimately, when I sat down with the other 3 faculty at the time, now there's just 3 of us teaching the course, but we decided that the best option for the student was to go with the open textbook that we found at the University of Minnesota Open Textbook Library. And I provided some links to that book and 2 others that we actually use now on the last slide. So So that fall, we finished our course design. We decided, let's go with 300 points, 200 of which would be exams and quizzes using a common test bank. The other 100 points would be at instructor discretion. We further aligned our learning outcomes with those tag requirements. We sat down and talked about the sequence. We weren't crazy about the sequence in the textbook, so we kind of, moved that around and organized the course into 3 major units. And then in the spring, we split up those 11 modules that were in our design, and we all took responsibility for creating PowerPoint decks and test questions for each of those modules. I was the collector of the material, and I didn't really serve as an editor. I didn't think that was, appropriate to start moving stuff around, all the work that the other faculty had done, but tried to look at things, and just if there were minor little things I could correct or edit, then I did that. That summer, I actually worked with our design and development group to sort of reformat all of the decks to have a same look and feel, address accessibility. We completed our tag submission template, which was a quite labor-intensive process, but got that submitted. And then in the fall of 2018 is when we used material for the first time. And we did get that tag approval. And as we worked through the material, we found, gosh, there's some things we could have done better. You're so immersed in so much material, and you finally get to implement it. You're thinking, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't have taken this out, or maybe this could be stronger. So as we made those observations, I just kept track of them. I kept a master file of all the documents, and we just worked together on that and shared kind of what our findings were. Typically, if one realized something, the other one, had already realized it, or, we were on the same page. But one unexpected benefit was how, you guys know how labor intensive it is to implement a new course. And, I tend to get so focused on getting myself comfortable with the material. And what was great about this situation is through this collaboration, I didn't have to worry about having a PowerPoint deck. Was it exactly, the way I might have done it? Probably not. But at the same time, I was able to focus on the material, getting comfortable with it, and kind of assessing where we needed to make some changes for improvement. So that was a nice benefit, having everybody contribute to the test bank, contribute to the slides, so that I could focus on content. And then, so that spring, with enhancements made, we used the new course design for my first time teaching an online, this course online. So we added a new module. As I said, we realized a couple of areas just weren't strong enough. We added a new module on communication, accessed another open resource. I actually worked with a communications person in our college to help me find some materials, and we created a new lesson. And then in the fall of 2019 and into this semester, we added a new module on ethics. That was an area from our assessment, from assurance of learning, that we knew we needed to strengthen. So we accessed another open resource for that topic. So you can see that it took a little bit of time. We made progress each semester, but it's a lot of work, and it's just not, going to happen overnight. So just to kind of summarize what I viewed kind of, as the project manager, kind of looking back at this, what were some things that worked really well for us? Getting that alignment document on paper was really important, and having consensus on the learning objectives, how we wanted to organize the content, and that really leads into collaboration, and just having that committee who was committed really to doing the best thing for the student. Didn't have any particular skin in the game as to what kind of book we used, or I must use my PowerPoints. And over time, I know, each of us has made adjustments to supplement the standard PowerPoints, but we've kept the materials pretty pure in terms of just having that consistency. Actually using the book, we committed to using the book. So often students complain because, you know, I have to buy a book, we don't use it. I mean, I hear that periodically, and so we were committed to that. We use the book, it has some nice cases in it, some little exercises, so we try to make sure we're utilizing it. That kind of, you know, challenges students. They have to go to the book to do some of the work. And having a point person, you know, I was the course coordinator, so that was kind of a natural for me to do that. I have a lot of project management experience in my former life, so I was probably the right person to kind of push things. You know, did we meet every single date that we set? No, but you know, to our committee's credit, we just kept moving forward over those several semesters that I mentioned. And then that focus on continuous improvement. You know, when you get done with a project like that and you implement your first semester, you think, oh my gosh, I'm finally finished. And then you start to see these things that you know could be better. And just, you know, not being afraid to tackle that, I think was really important. And now I think we really have a very, very nice course that's that much closer that we can prepare it for our QM review at some point, which was supposed to be potentially this summer or fall, but I don't know. We'll see what happens there. So in terms of benefits of this process, having access to the book on day one, you know, students in our classes, or we hear, you know, I don't have the book, I can't afford the book, I didn't get my financial assistance, et cetera, et cetera. So that's no longer an issue. The university created a grant program during this work for faculty who was working to use open educational resources, and our team was awarded $2,500 for that work. That was completed, and the improvements that we made. And as I said, at different times we partnered with different people. After the initial design, we worked with our design and development team, we worked with libraries. I'll say a little bit more about the grant on the next slide. Hopefully this work is helping us get ready for QM. You know, we created, or we designed the course with QM in mind. Is it QM ready? Absolutely not. I did a QM review just a couple of weeks ago. I finished one and I thought to myself, that was probably good timing, because it made me realize that we do have a little bit more work to do before that's ready for prime time. So that'll be our next move. Student engagement, overall the median grade in my sections actually went down 4 points, but and one of the other faculty had a similar result, but we were not concerned about that because we really felt this material was more robust. We actually see higher scores in our online sections. I think, you know, that has to do with the discipline required of keeping up with work on a week-to-week basis. But anecdotally, the quality of the work is better. And for our face-to-face classes, speaking for myself, I do see, you know, more students engaged. And I think, you know, we've had some pretty good results in that regard. The transition was fairly smooth. As I said, it took several semesters, but I think with the committee working together, it was a fairly smooth process. All right, so I wanted to just share a few numbers. The first semester, when we were shortly after we started this project, we conducted a survey, and we've done several surveys since then, but this is just a little snapshot. We heard from 28 students, and what students were telling us was that in terms of coping with cost, 92% of them would delay purchasing a textbook due to the cost. 78% would never purchase a textbook at all. Down below in the second section, has the cost of the textbook caused you to not purchase the required textbook? 85%. So we all saw this over the years. When I first started teaching, the management textbook was $245. It was a hardback, beautiful pictures from a well-known publisher. It was a great book, but many students didn't buy it. You know, I managed to get a few extra books. I was loaning them out. I could see that it impacted students in terms of their grades. And then a couple of years after I came to Akron, one of our faculty wrote a book with the intent of dealing with this issue. So it was lower cost. So we used that for a few years through a couple of editions. And then when that person was no longer there, our chair really kind of challenged us to up our game, find a more robust book and, lower the cost and, get that consistency across sections that he had been desiring for a long time. So just a few numbers to give you a sense of the savings. Over 2 semesters in the fall of 2017 and 18, with 634 students enrolled, that the cost of books, is about, $59,000. And if only 75% of that enrollment bought those books, we're talking about $44,000. And so when you add on subsequent semesters in the fall of 18 and spring of 19, you see that savings really starts to go up quite a bit. Our Affordable Learning Initiative really started with a proposal out of our design and development group to academic affairs. And they asked for a one-time funding of $10,000. The grant spent $9,500 of that money. They awarded grants to 5 different courses. And the 5 funded projects actually saved over $260,000 those first semester of their implementation. So we felt really good about that. We were happy to participate in that. When it started, our work was underway, but we continued to improve our project and our design. And so we were able to benefit from that. And we've had a chance to present our work at a couple of regional local conferences, which has been fun too. For more information on the grant, if anyone's interested in learning more about that, you can contact our senior instructional designer, Steve Kaufman. I got his permission to put his email there. He is also our QM coordinator and is really a great resource for us and has led this effort at Akron, working with faculty. So just some additional anecdotal feedback from another survey. The comments down at the bottom of the screen from students. It just feels better to have free access to something rather than stress on the big price tag. The textbook was organized, the information was presented in a manner that increased retention, took my stress away from money. It's nice to have the book where I can search for words instead of flipping through a book, so easy access. So, we've seen a lot of positive feedback about that. I talk to students every semester about their thoughts about the material to get their input for improvement. And of course, we have our standard surveys, but I really like to talk to people face to face or just throw out an email and get some input. And really the response from students has been nothing but positive on this issue. All right, so we've got a little bit of time left. And so I would love to answer any questions or share any other aspects of our project. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to take those.
There are no specific questions in the Q&A at this time, but let's give it a minute or two. There may be some people who type a few in there, and we certainly have the time to get to those.
Okay.
While we're waiting, I'll just remind you, I posted in the chat the link for the session survey. So if you have a moment and can provide a little feedback, that would definitely be helpful. And I also want to thank Sheri for sharing all of that information with us. I've been very interested in OER, so for me it was great to hear. Looks like we have a question from Danielle Harris. Have you seen a lot of other faculty jump on board and start moving to OER?
Yes, we have. Danielle, thank you. That's a great question. I wish I had the stats on that from the folks that are running that or tend to be kind of managing that process or helping faculty, but we have seen a lot of it over the past few years. I've seen it even in some of the graduate courses that we have in our department. And there's, gosh, as far as another core course, I know our business statistics course uses it, uses an open resource. And also, I know that a number of our gen ed courses are using open resources. And if you go to any of the libraries that I noted on the links here on the last slide, the University of Minnesota Open Textbook Library, my communications book came from Saylor.org. That's another great resource. And then my business ethics book, and by book, I mean for communications, I grabbed 2 chapters, and for ethics, I pulled 2 chapters and asked the students to, key in on those chapters for the ethics lesson, for instance. OpenStax is another one. I think that's from Rice University. But you can go in and see just the variety of topics, but a lot for gen ed, and I'm seeing more and more for some of the core courses. Now, the downside is that some of the materials, in many cases, the materials aren't developed. So, if you're a one-person show, that's a lot of work. I mean, there's no question that it is. I think the way we work together as a committee and kind of shared the workload, I thought was really beneficial, because, it can be a lot of work. Now, I think as part of our affordable learning initiative, I haven't heard an update lately, but part of our agreement was that we would share, we're not sharing our test bank, but we are going to share our slides in an open forum, so they'll be made available for others to use and edit as they see fit.
All right, thanks. Then there was a question from Nancy Coletti. Do you have any experience with using MOOCs?
No, Nancy, I've taken a couple offered by people that I know from Case Western. I did a number of years of exec ed up there when I was in my former position in learning and development. We did all of our exec ed. I managed that process with Case, so I know they've been involved in delivering some MOOCs, and I've taken a couple, but no, I've never used them for any, for credit courses.
Okay, looks like there's another question. I can't open any links in the question and answer section. Okay, let me just mention that I did put all of the links in the chat, so that's where they all are. And because of Zoom security, you can't click on them directly and be brought to them, but if you copy and paste them into your browser, you should be able to get to all of those links. So I posted a link for Sheri's materials that's off of the QM website, and you should be able to go there and be able to get those.
I think I would just add, I kind of felt, for this course, all of our business majors and minors take it. And so we have a lot of sections. Some sections are 75. Some are, my online sections usually top out at 45. But I think, for courses like this, and if you look on the libraries, you'll see some of the topics where there are some open resources. We felt we had an obligation to make this work. There are other courses where, textbooks, in my view, are required, because I'm not going to take the time, to create all of those materials. I teach a training course for HR majors. And, I use a textbook that's very highly regarded, and, I wouldn't do it any other way. So I think there's a place for it, for, I'm sure some other, other topics for various reasons, still require textbook. And I totally get that. I use textbooks in a couple of my other classes. and I use them. You know, if I ask the students to buy the book, I use them. I use the cases, I use the activities. You know, I want to make the most of it. But I do think in a course like this, where there was, you know, several options available, we really felt obligated to try to do our part to lower our costs for our students, and feel pretty good about where we ended up.
Okay, well, seeing as no more questions and we're right at time, I'm going to stop the recording.